Hello, everybody. My name is Ratnos, and welcome to the mechanics look at the last four bosses of Aberrus, the Shrouded Crucible. So this is the new raid coming out. We're going to take a look at the dungeon journal mechanics for Zskarn, Magmorax, Echo of Neltharion, which doesn't have a image of him, but it says Neltharion here, but it's some kind of like echo or image of him, like Syndragosa's image in Azure Vault and stuff. And Scalecommander Sarkareth, the end boss here. Nice to have a regular little humanoid-sized end boss, although it'd be a little annoying for melee compared to Razageth, where you could hit her from anywhere in the same zip code. Okay, so if you missed it, by the way, yesterday there should be a video up with the the five first bosses, so maybe interested in that as well. But yeah, we're just gonna read the dungeon journal and see what these things do and talk about them. Should be fun. I don't know. I find these things cool. Might not be your cup of tea, though, so it's not PTR testing or anything like that. PTR testing, we don't know when that's going to be. I will have at least streams of those, and I'll try and make videos about those bosses once they are PTR testable as well. If you want to delay all of this for when the raid actually comes out as well, totally don't blame you. But I think it's cool to... I love reading dungeon journals. I think it's a really cool time. So, okay. Zskarn. Zskarn walked these halls when they were first formed, and bore witness to Neltharion's many profound experiments. Now that the Crucible stirs with power once more, Zskarn will stop at nothing to claim the Crucible and continue his master's legacy. So this is another claimant to the Black Dragonflight's throne. Dragonfire traps. So this boss, by the way, a lot of the loot here is called Dragonkin Trapmaster, Dragonspawn Caretaker. So kind of a little bit of like, egg caretaking vibes, Black Dragonflight legacy vibes, but also trap. Painsmith Raznal type vibes. Upon reaching 100 energy, Zskarn activates several traps that do damage every 1 second for 10 seconds to all enemies within 10 yards of the trap. The effect stacks, but it does look like it's dispellable. Shadow Priest Mass Dispel might be very good against this sort of thing as well, depending on how avoidable this is. Tactical Destruction. Zskarn unleashes a series of rapid explosions at nearby dragon statues, inflicting 1 million fire damage to all players caught within. You probably want to not be within those. I don't know how those dragon statues work. Maybe they're like Iron Maiden type things where you get, caught inside them somehow, or you have to, I don't know, bust them out or something. We'll see if there's some info about those further down the line. Shrapnel Bomb is a tank mechanic that says after 30 seconds, Shrapnel Bomb detonates, dealing a boatload of physical damage, and an additional physical damage over time to all players. Now, notably, the initial hit of physical damage will be reduced by armor, but the damage over time, physical damage over time, is not reduced by armor, so that is a pretty scary part here. The base damage of the physical dot is actually quite a bit more than the initial damage, and the initial damage is going to be reduced by armor. So mostly the dot here is going to be the scary part. Triggering a shrapnel bomb early causes a localized detonation, which deals even more physical damage upfront and additional damage over time for 8 seconds. So this looks like a tank mechanic that puts a bomb on the tank. They have to go and find... Somehow there's a way to trigger it early. Triggering it early is going to do a lot of damage, but it's going to be localized, so it's only going to affect the tank and potentially anybody that's too close, doesn't say. And that upfront damage is a lot more, but it's a tank, so they will presumably be good at taking a big upfront physical damage hit. And then the dot will be potentially nasty, but it looks like it's only going to be on the tank in that case. But if you fail to do that, then it does wipe the raid, probably, is what happens there. Okay. Animate Golems. Zskarn animates several Dragonfire Golems to assist him by seeking out and activating inactive Dragonfire traps. You can interrupt that cast when they try to activate them. And if there are no inactive Dragonfire traps, they will instead assist Zskarn in eliminating all hostile enemies. So we'll see how bad that is. Might be a soft enrage in the fight or something. Might be something that comes sooner or later, depending on how you play the fight as well. Rummaging through. So you can rummage through a defeated Dragonfire Golem's parts, which will let you deactivate an active Dragonfire trap. So that's kind of cool. So presumably you're going to want to kill these things pretty quickly and kick them to stop them from actually activating the Dragonfire traps. Okay. Blast Wave. Zskarn unleashes a devastating blast wave, which is like the Fire Mage blast wave, or I guess Mage blast wave ability, knocking back all players and doing a bunch of damage up front and over time. Fire damage, but healable. Healable numbers, very healable. Finally, there's Unstable Embers, which deals... it's a fire dot a nasty fire dot here. This is going to be 700k over 10 seconds, so one that's going to require quite a bit of healing, and it's also a 5-yard AoE, so whoever is affected by this, it looks like it's player targeted, and whoever's affected by this needs to probably defensive, get a bunch of heals, and not stand too close to other people. Finally, there's Searing Claws. This is the tank mechanic. It is a fire dot that stacks up on autos. This is the other tank mechanic besides Shrapnel Bomb. Or maybe Shrapnel Bomb isn't applied to the tank. Maybe Shrapnel Bombs just show up in the room, and the tank has to go and trigger them early. And maybe it doesn't have to be a tank. Maybe it could also be a DPS with an immunity or something as well. So that's actually probably more likely to be how this mechanic works, given that there is another tank mechanic down here. Cool. All right. Let's go take a look at the next boss. All right, up next we have Magmorax, the fire hydra. Very cool. Not to be confused with the fire hydrant. This is a beast its eyes never close. It will never breaks. Its will never breaks. Okay, that makes more sense than it will never breaks. Magmorax, the beast of legend, guards the passage into the deepest chambers of the Shattered Crucible. So some Cerberus vibes here, I guess, from this thing. Catastrophic Eruption is a deadly mechanic here. Upon reaching 100 energy, Magmorax erupts into flame and deals 125k every 2 seconds and increases fire damage taken by 50%. That effect stacks. This reads like an Enrage because it is initially survivable, but very quickly becomes lethal. So somewhat reminiscent of like the Taros Enrage. We'll see if it is a mechanic that you're supposed to delay or avoid, or if it's just the Enrage of the fight that you're supposed to kill the boss during the first few ticks of, which is always cool. I love mechanics like that where you're, like Sludge Fist charges into the wall and you're trying to kill it before you die. Taros even sort of had that. Okay, Molten Spittle. Magmorax covers random players in Fiery Spit. Oh, some of my guildies are going to love this fight. Inflicting 62k fire damage every 1.5 seconds for 6 seconds. So this is going to be 249k total damage, fire damage. Upon removal, the player explodes, doing damage to all players within 10 yards and creating a magma puddle. This magma puddle continues to grow during the course of the fight, which deals damage to all players standing within. Standing in the pool causes it to shrink over time. Okay. When Magmorax is standing in a magma puddle, it violently thrashes about, gaining 5% energy and inflicting damage to all players every 1 second. So this makes me think that the energy is indeed the Enrage, and you're probably not supposed to ever bring the boss into a magma puddle, and you're probably supposed to have some players, tanky players probably, warlocks, go and stand in some magma puddles, shrink them down to their minimum size. Maybe you can even shrink them out of existence, but maybe you can only shrink them down to a certain minimum, and you just have some people watching to make sure they don't grow too much. Igniting Roar has a healer flag next to it. Magmorax unleashes a bellowing roar, inflicting fire damage to all players and setting them ablaze, inflicting an additional fire damage every second. This effect stacks. So this may be permanent fire dot over the course of the fight. Again, this is kind of giving me, Sludge Fist patchwork style fight vibes in the same way that Brashak already kind of did. But this sort of mechanic, it gives you a way that later in the fight you're taking more damage than you did earlier in the fight, and it increases in intensity as you get to the end of the fight. Overpowering Stomp is a physical damage to all players and a knockback. So presumably you want to be a little bit careful about not getting knocked back into a magma puddle. Depending on how far that knockback is, it may be more or less important. Fire damage comes out from the ability Blazing Breath, if you're caught in the Blazing Breath. My suggestion for this mechanic, without having seen it, is you probably want to stand in a place that's not in the breath. And then finally we have Incinerating Maws, which is the tank mechanic. Magmorax's heads viciously bite at its currently target, each bite inflicting fire damage and a fire dot, and increasing the damage taken, presumably from both the upfront and the damage over time portion of this, and stacking. So this is going to be a really nasty tank swap, right? Because not only does extra stacks mean that the dot damage base damage is getting increased, but also each extra stack is multiplying the damage taken from this. So this is going to be probably quite a scary tank mechanic when you get to the high stacks, and it's a 30-second debuff as well. So your tanks are, depending on how frequently this gets applied, this reads to me like something that's probably a swap on one and probably not applied very often. If it's more than that, that's gonna be quite a thing to tank. All right, Neltharion, Echo of Neltharion, penultimate boss here. Before the name Deathwing was whispered in terror, Neltharion was known as the Earth Warder. During this time, the aspect of Earth used his power to construct a massive hall deep beneath the surface, where he accumulated secret knowledge. A visage of the Black Dragon still resides within the Crucible, waiting for an opportunity to continue the work started so long ago, at any cost. Stage 1, the Earth Warder. Echoing Fissure, Neltharion shatters the ground, causing quakes that inflict a boatload of volcanic damage. Volcanic is fire plus nature. To all players, reduce the farther away they are from the quake. This effect echoes from every previous fissure that Neltharion has created. Additionally, the quake causes collapsed earth to fall from the ceiling. So presumably you're going to want to try and put these fissures as close as is safe to each other and have everybody else be as far away as possible from where all the quakes are going to be. Rushing Shadows. Neltharion blasts several players for shadow damage, knocks them back, and also does damage to any players between Neltharion and his targets, stunning them for 3 seconds. Players who collide with a piece of Twisted Eruption will shatter it. Okay. I don't know what a piece of Twisted Eruption is yet. Maybe that's Twisted Earth. Impacting Twisted Earth at high speed shatters it. Okay, so we don't know what Twisted Earth is yet, but we're going to find out here. So let's do that first. Neltharion fires a stream of shadow flame lava, forming it into a wall of twisted rocks, dividing the room. Okay, so there is he walls the room in half. Players at the wall's location are hit by a Twisted Eruption, which does damage to players and knocks them back, and then also does damage to everybody, even if you didn't get hit by it. Okay, so you're going to want to have the players... Probably what's going to happen with Rushing Shadows is it's going to target players first, and then the damage will come out a couple seconds later. And you'll probably want to get blasted into the wall to shatter the wall and open up the room once again. Impacting the player for extra physical damage and doing physical damage to all players and sending a shower of shattered rock around the room. So you're going to want the people targeted by Rushing Shadows to get blasted into the wall, one or maybe multiple, if you need multiple to shatter multiple segments of the wall, perhaps. And then you're going to want to make sure that nobody is between Neltharion and those targets, or else they will get stunned for 3 seconds and take extra damage as well. So kind of a cool setup idea. Finally, there's a tank mechanic here, Calamitous Strike. Neltharion smashes his current target with a massive strike, inflicting 500k physical damage, not too bad, knocking them far away, increasing physical damage taken by 200 for 3 seconds, and players who collide with a piece of Twisted Eruption will shatter it. Shatter again. So this tank mechanic does 500k physical. It only increases their physical taken for 3 seconds, but if you hit the wall, you take physical damage. But it's only 200%. So maybe the best play actually is to use this tank mechanic to break the wall. Maybe you have to use the tank mechanic and the shadows mechanic to break the wall. Maybe the walls are like something that you really are racing to just destroy and keep in check. I'm not sure. That's kind of cool, though. All right. Stage 2, Corruption takes hold. Surrender to Corruption. Neltharion surrenders to the power of Voices from Beyond, inflicting shadow damage to all players, and a final boatload of shadow damage to all players at the end. Additionally, Neltharion will force a class to succumb. So this is a callback to Nefarian in Blackwing Lair's class calls mechanic. Voice from Beyond is a add that you can only hit if you are the class that succumbs. And they will empower Neltharion with shadow power for as long as they live. But yeah, they remain hidden in the shadows until attacked. And I think they can only be attacked by players that were succumbing to corruption. They also, when they are attacked, they rupture the veil of Shadow Flame, doing a shadow dot to all players. So you probably don't want to do too many stacks of this at once, or maybe you do with a bunch of healer cooldowns, but it's 15 seconds. That's a long time to live multiple stacks. Okay, so yeah, Corruption. Neltharion twists players with shadowy magic, corrupting their abilities, but also allowing them to see beyond the Veil of Shadows. So whichever class he chooses is going to be the one that has to break out these Voices from Beyond, but they are going to be affected by one of these different effects. Warriors are going to do an AoE Blade Storm that says all players, so anybody within 8 yards is going to take physical damage, so the Warriors are going to want to make sure that they don't stand on top of everybody else. Paladins have a similar effect here, which causes them to unleash Zealous Hammers every 6 seconds, doing holy damage to all creatures and players that stand in their path. Again, it's actually more damage. Maybe it's not AoE, or maybe it is AoE. I'm not sure, but it's more damage and it's holy instead of fizz than the warrior one. The hunters are going to have to summon corrupted pets from their stable, forcing them to attack. These pets will explode in a 10-yard AoE when they die. Rogues will shadow step every 10 seconds and backstab random players in your raid. Priests will cast an AoE fear that is a 10-yard. Okay, I guess we don't know how many yards. Within 0 yards. Okay, no idea how many yards, but yeah, a dot and a fear, a 6-second fear for everybody that's close to that, so presumably don't want to be those. DKs will randomly death grip people. Shamans will make a shadow elemental that explodes when it dies. Mages will do AoE to everybody within 10 yards. Warlocks will summon a ravenous void beast that pulses AoE damage to all players within 10 yards for as long as it lives, and then when it dies, it explodes, doing damage to all players within 10 yards. All creatures and players in 10 yards. So maybe you're supposed to use these. I think the thing with most of these is that they do damage to you and the enemies as well. So you can use these kind of like the Crucible of Storms mechanics, where it's like, okay, this will damage you, but you can also use it to damage enemies. Spirit Water and Decay, an inversion of Storm, Earth, and Fire. Corrupts the monk's essence, splitting 3 spirits from them that attack outside of their control, leap to random players with Flying Spirit Kick, and explode when they die. Wild Shift. This one is different than all the other ones. Takes advantage of the druid's connection to nature, forcing them to shapeshift to a random form every 6 seconds for 30 seconds. Love it. I love what this fight's going to do to Moonkins. That's really good. Chaos Dance just makes Demon Hunters AoE within 8 yards of them, and Evokers get forced to cast Wild Breath every 6 seconds for 30 seconds as they fly over the battlefield. So it's going to turn them into strafing, running, deep breathing dragons. Cool. Okay. Neltharion draws in Dark Power to annihilate players, doing damage to all players. Each cast increases the damage done, and its casting time as well. So it's going to be something that will be scary about this phase. I guess probably a soft enrage of the phase. Sweeping Shadows. Neltharion flings out shadowy power in a sweeping strike, inflicting shadow damage to all players in front of him, and an additional shadow damage over time to people hit. So that's probably a frontal that you will want to dodge. And then there is the tank mechanic of this phase, which is physical damage, sundering the player's shadow from their body. Neltharion then attacks the player's helpless body with a shadow strike. While in control of their shadow, the player is incorporeal and can move through the walls. Neltharion strikes at the player's shadowless body, so that your shadow is what you control and your body is left behind, I guess, and Neltharion attacks your body for physical damage, hurtling it through the room to rejoin the player's shadow. The rejoining causes the player to take their body's missing health as shadow damage, additionally increases damage taken from this, and also the player's body colliding with the walls will shatter them. So you can maybe use this to keep clearing out walls that you need to get rid of. I'm not sure. Very cool tank mechanic, at least from reading it. Finally, stage 3, Reality Fractures. Neltharion rips nearby twisted earth into portals to the Void Realm, doing shadow damage to all players in 150 yards of the detonation. They're probably not going to be able to outrange that. And continuously allowing twisted aberrations into reality. Standing in a portal disconnects a player from reality. A couple of my guildies have been doing this for many tiers already. Inflicting damage over time, reducing their damage done, and also reducing their damage taken from Ebon Destruction. So presumably you're going to want to dip into these during Ebon Destruction casts. Twisted Aberrations don't have mechanics yet. Maybe they just run an auto people, and maybe it's something where it sort of just overwhelms you over time. But yeah, or maybe they have mechanics that just aren't implemented yet. And then finally, there's Ebon Destruction. Neltharion draws upon, or not finally actually, then there is Ebon Destruction. Neltharion draws upon his might, blasts all players for 624k volcanic damage, and an additional 62k every 1.5 seconds, 15 seconds. This power dispels any shattered reality players are standing in. So the Shattered Reality portals are the things the ads are spawning from. You stand in them to take less damage from the Ebb and Destruction, unknown how much less, but presumably enough to be able to survive it. And then when Neltharion does the Ebb and Destruction, it will shatter, it will dispel any of those portals. So maybe this is something where you dispel all the portals, or maybe Neltharion only makes a certain number of them at the start of this phase, and so you need to budget them and make sure that people don't stand in too many for each Ebb and Destruction cast, so you don't run out for later casts in the fight. I don't know. Rushing Shadows is up next. This is the same mechanic from P1. Targets players, knocks them back, and stuns anybody that is between Neltharion and the players. Again, we think this probably will be telegraphed and will have a cast time or something. And it can also be used to blow up walls if there are still walls in here. And then he also does Calamitous Strike, just like in P1, which is the tank smash that knocks them back and also can blow up walls. It doesn't say anything about him still making walls later in the fight, but maybe he does also still later in the fight. I don't know. Either way, cool fight. Love the Blackwing Lair callbacks. There's also Blackwing Lair callbacks in the itemization that you can find here as well. Very, very cool. Finally, we have Scalecommander Sarkareth. Formerly one of the 5 Scale Commanders of the Drakthir, Sarkareth broke away to rebel against the Dragonflights. Now leader of the Sundered Flame, Sarkareth leads an army into Neltharion's Shattered Crucible to claim the power within and use it to overthrow the Aspects. So, okay, this fight has 3 stages in the Dungeon Journal, at least. We don't know if there are potentially going to be more, a Secret Mythic phase, something like that, never know. And it's worth noting that with end bosses in particular, there are often Mythic mechanics that are absent from the Dungeon Journal intentionally, that they just leave out, especially in the last phases. Okay, so, Oblivion. Being struck with Avoidability causes Oblivion, which is a 25-second dot. If you get 10 stacks, the target is lost in the emptiness between stars. Oh, wow, that's cool. All right. Emptiness between stars says the target is stranded alone in the vast infinite of space. Stripping all magic effects and reducing damage and healing done by 99%. After 15 seconds, if they have not recovered fragments of their mind, they are lost forever and perish. So maybe you have to use this intentionally to strip the magic effects from yourself if there are ones that you need to dispel. Otherwise, it just seems like an interesting thing that if you accidentally take too much Oblivion, or if you happen to be targeted by mechanics that give you a lot of Oblivion, then this emptiness between the stars happens to you. Or maybe the Oblivion it's not possible to drop it. Maybe it gets applied to all players every 20 seconds or something through some mechanic, in which case you would want some players intentionally taking stacks early so that you can stagger who's dealing with emptiness at any given time. Stellar Flare says, while stranded in space, players can absorb stellar flares to gain haste and movement speed. That affects stacks. So yeah, it does seem like there's probably going to be something involving intentionally or uncontrollably dealing with this emptiness between the stars mechanic and then getting these stellar flares. Cool. All right. So that's present during the whole fight. Stage 1, the Legacy of the Drakthir. Scalecommander Sarkareth uses the full might of his Drakthir abilities to deter his foes. Pressing Howl is knockback and increases the incoming effects of Mass Disintegrate, Searing Breath, and Glittering Surge. There's a mythic thing here as well that says when this is removed, it deals damage to all other players. So this is very much like the Oppressing Roar Drakthir ability, where you get a debuff and then next time you would take a CC, it's for a longer duration. But this fight has a twist on it where it's like, okay, the whole raid is going to get knocked back, everybody's going to get a stack of Oppressing Howl, and then on Mythic in particular, when you next get hit by a mechanic that is affected by this, you're going to pulse for raid damage. So you're going to need to be careful to have not everybody clear their Oppressing Howl debuffs all at once. Okay. Glittering Surge is one ability that can remove Oppressing Howl. It is a dot on the whole raid. If it strikes a player with Oppressing Howl, it removes the Oppressing Howl and applies Dazzled, which is a stun and a boatload of arcane damage. Oh, wow, that is nasty. So maybe this is something you're supposed to dodge by getting sent into the emptiness within the stars or something. Okay. Scorching Bomb. This one is a fire damage within 12 yards every 1 second. After 12 seconds, the bombs explode. The bombs explode to all players and also put a dot on everybody. Burning ground is left behind by these bombs as well. Mass Disintegrate is another mechanic that can clear a Pressing Howl. It marks players. 6 seconds later, the energy blasts out in a line, doing arcane damage. If Mass Disintegrate, or presumably this line part of it as well, strikes a target with a Pressing Howl, it will apply Disintegrated. Disintegrated causes the target to take a much more survivable amount of arcane damage and giving you a slow by 35%, okay? Coming into contact with magic residue left behind from Mass Disintegrate does quite a bit of damage every 1 second and reduces movement speed by 50%. Okay, so maybe this is the line, or maybe this is something that gets left behind after the cast. Then we have Searing Breath. This is a frontal cone. It deals damage instantly, with an additional fire damage over time. The breath repeats 3 times and stacks. If the breath strikes a target with a Pressing Howl, it will remove a Pressing Howl and apply Seared. Seared is fire damage over time. Okay. This is the least nasty mechanic that happens when you get your Pressing Howl removed, although it doesn't have a duration, so maybe it's just dot for the rest of the fight, in which case, that's maybe the most nasty. So maybe what you want to do is you want some players taking each of these 3 repeats to clear their Pressing Howls. Depending on that, it's for 12 seconds, so you get 4 seconds between each one. Or maybe you get 6 seconds between if it goes at 0, 6, and 12. I don't know. That's cool. Drifting Embers is kind of like Fire. It's got the Firestorm logo here. And it is an AoE that motes of flame fall from above, doing fire damage and knocking back players they strike. Okay, so you want to dodge those, probably. Burning Claws is the tank mechanic. It is a frontal cone, deals a bunch of physical damage, and a fire damage over time for 30 seconds. When this expires, so it stacks, and then when it expires, it releases a blazing blast. A burning nova erupts from the target, inflicting 15% of the total fire damage taken from Burning Claws to all players as fire damage. Wow. So this is a take on the Razageth tank mechanic. It's a 30-second dot, and the total damage you take from this dot over 30 seconds is going to be very relevant because it's going to explode for the raid. Let's pull out a little calculator here. So 66608 times 30. So this is going to be 2 million total fire damage, unmitigated. And then this is going to be 300k on the raid. Now, all tanks have ways of passively reducing this damage by a little bit. Some tanks have more than others, though. There are tanks like DK can AMS and remove, probably a solid 25% of this damage from the AMS being active during some of it. Or if they can AMS the whole thing, obviously that would be really powerful, but probably they can't. DHs take a lot less magic damage, right? Warriors, you can hit Spell Reflect twice and cover 10 of these 30 seconds with a little bit of a magic DR. You can be in defensive stance. So all of these things can be done. Maybe we're talking about reducing this down to like 200k. But if the tank who's affected gets spammed with Power Word shields, if they get that big new shield tank trinket pumped into them, if they're a warrior using Ignore Pain, taking half damage against this dot as well, all of those things will potentially be reducing this to a very small explosion. But unmitigated, this will be quite a large explosion. Unlike the Razageth Breath, it's never going to be like full raid one-shotty, but 300k, that's a lot of damage. So you're going to want to have some ways of dealing with this. Some tank specs are definitely going to be better than others at dealing with this. You would think that this sort of fire dot is not actually a warrior specialty, but Ignore Pain is kind of actually OP for this sort of thing. It's 50% reduction on the total number at the end, plus all the other warrior stuff. So that's actually probably quite good to be a warrior against this. I'm not sure. Okay. Stage 2. Stage 2. I'm going to close. Okay, I can't close out of all the stage. Actually, maybe I can. Okay, yeah. Stage 2. A Touch of the Forbidden. Sarkareth draws in power from the Void to enhance his abilities. Void Bombs. Sarkareth places Void Bombs nearby players. Each inflicts shatter damage to players within 12 yards every 5 seconds. After 20 seconds, the bombs explode, doing damage to all players for the next 4 seconds. If you step into the Void Bomb, you will cause the Void energy to dissipate in the caster. Upon removal, the Void energy erupts with a Void Surge unless that player is within the emptiness between stars. Okay, so this is something that you'll use. This is Void damage. Presumably this stacks up the Oblivion mechanic. And also you will soak these bombs. You will then be the person that will explode into a Void Surge when the bomb expires on you. But if you can shift yourself into the emptiness between stars when that would happen, you take the damage away. Very cool. Abyssal Breath. Sarkareth takes in a deep breath, flies to a location, leaving void residue in his wake. If you're new to WoW or whatever, anytime anything says takes in a deep breath, that means it's about to be a dragon that will fly over the battlefield, breathing down upon everything. So takes in a deep breath, flies to a location, breathing as he's doing it, leaving void residue in his wake. Standing within the residue inflicts not actually a serious amount of damage over time, right? This, I guess it is a serious, but not an instantly lethal amount of damage. Upon casting Abyssal Breath, Sarkareth leaves behind images of himself. These images will restore health every 1 second. They will also do tank damage, a tank dot that also increases damage taken by 25%. Okay. The boss also creates another one that also restores 20% of its maximum health every 1 second and has an interruptible cast that will otherwise do damage and interrupt all players. This is an interesting, this rescind mechanic. I wonder if this just means you have to out DPS this healing and just really nuke these things down. This might be something where you want a Mortal Strike effect on these mobs as well. Or maybe this is some kind of cast that you just beat the rescind cast to stop them from healing. I don't know. Desolate Blossom is a bulb of void energy at player locations that pulse waves to all players and creatures within them every 0.5 seconds, absorbing healing and removing rescind. Okay, so you want to take the images that Sarkareth creates into the Desolate Blossoms so that they get this healing absorbed so that they will be killable. That's kind of cool. So you'll just want to kite them into there and then turn them around, have it be that the tank isn't in the blossom, the image is in the blossom, and you kill the image while it's in the blossom. Infinite Duress. Sarkareth causes the infinite emptiness of space to weigh heavily on the target's mind. Ooh, yeah. You know, alone with your thoughts, right? Inflicting 60k shadow damage every 3 seconds for 30 seconds. Upon removal, this triggers dread. Yeah, upon application as well. Am I right? This one does 108k shadow damage to all players and knocks them away. And it's dispellable. Okay, so it's not that nasty of a dot, right? This is 20k DPS. Presumably this is going to be something that affects maybe multiple players and you need to stagger the dispels. Or maybe it only affects one player and you just need to dispel it at a correct time. Or maybe the player who's affected, the knockback is something you actually really want to avoid. And so you have the player that's affected shift themselves into the emptiness between the stars so that they don't explode with dread on the raid. I don't know. Cool mechanic. Maybe you use some combination of all three of those things. Ebon Might says, upon casting any spell, Sarkareth empowers his allies with the might of the Black Dragons. This effect increases their damage done and movement speed. Upon reaching 5 applications, the target becomes immune to CC and interrupts. So what this means is that you can temporarily CC the adds that he creates, but if you leave them for too long, they're going to become CC immune, and then you're going to wipe. Void Claws causes Sarkareth to do a frontal cone again. This frontal cone presumably is tank targeted, so the tank can't dodge it, but everybody else can. It deals physical damage and shadow damage over time, reducing healing and absorbs received by 50% for 21 seconds. This effect stacks. Upon expiration, it releases a Void Blast, which damages for 25% of the total shadow damage to players within 30 yards. So, okay. Notably here, unlike the P1, which is all damage, this P2 tank mechanic is only a 30-yard AoE. So maybe you will just go and explode far enough away that you don't kill every other player. It is a higher percentage of the shadow damage you've taken. It's a similar size dot. It's just more damage per tick, but smaller tick rate. It does reduce your healing and absorbs received, though, so that's kind of nasty. Yeah, interesting. Interesting little tank mechanic here. I wonder if either of these tank mechanics are supposed to get shifted into the stars as well to avoid the damage and fall-off damage of them as well. Maybe this is the kind of fight where you choose some mechanics to deal with and some mechanics you can shift people between the stars to deal with. That's really cool. All right. Stage 3. Let's close up the earlier stages again. The Seas of Infinity. Eschewing his draconic abilities, Sarkareth fully embraces the Void in a final bid for power. Void Bomb. Void Bombs are the same as before. Okay, same as the P2 Void Bombs. Cosmic Ascension. Sarkareth flies up through a void portal. Let's actually just make sure. Yeah, these are the same as the P2 ones. Okay. Flies up through a void portal, crashes through the floor, and inflicts shadow damage and knocking back players struck. Okay. You want to dodge that if you can, I guess. Sarkareth launches several asteroids from his wings, which crash into the ground and do shadow damage to nearby players every 3 seconds. Cool. Hurling Barrage. Sarkareth tears open portals to infinity, conjuring void images of himself that rush out in a line through a player. These images do shadow damage to target struck. So this is potentially going to be somewhat telegraphed, and unlike other mechanics, it's a line attack that goes not just to, but through a player. So you're going to want to not be in front of or behind the targeted players relative to Sarkareth. That might be the sort of thing where you have, 3 world markers that the targeted players go to, and everybody else doesn't stand in those lines, or maybe you have to YOLO it a little bit more, depending on reaction times and other mechanics. Scouring Eternity is 1 million shadow damage after a massive supernova grows and erupts, and it damages all players that are not behind an astral formation. Okay, so the asteroids that get dropped after Cosmic Ascension, you're going to need to stand behind them to avoid getting killed by the supernova. Cool. Sarkareth focuses the crushing weight of space upon a player. After 8 seconds, a black hole is formed, inflicting 2 million shadow damage, split evenly among all players struck. The black hole also pulls in and absorbs nearby astral formations before finally erupting and inflicting shadow damage to all players within 10 yards. So this is a soak and then get out. Maybe you use this to clear the astral formations, or maybe you don't want to clear your astral formations because you need to use them to dodge the Scouring Eternity. I don't know. Infinite Duress is the same thing where you get this dispellable debuff. When it's dispelled, it knocks everybody back. Motes of Oblivion are swirlies that give you applications of Oblivion to players they strike. So this is probably something you'll actually want to take at some points in order to shift yourself between the stars. And finally, Void Claws is the same mechanic as the P2 Void Claws. Okay, so P3 has a lot of mechanical overlap with P2, and potentially some mechanics that aren't here in the Dungeon Journal, because otherwise it actually seems a little bit less complicated than P2. But cool sounding fight. It reminds me of Star Augur Atreus with the kind of void space theme stuff coming in later in the fight. So yeah, neat. This Dungeon Journal is neat. I'm looking forward to these boss fights. Can't wait to test them out on the PTR, see what they look like. When that happens, of course, I'll try and upload PTR testing videos. I haven't done that in the past, but I will try and do that this time. Hope you've enjoyed this little look at the Dungeon Journal for Aberrus here. And thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.